Today's episode is brought to you by the Daily Gardener Friday newsletter. You can sign up for the newsletter over at thedailygardener.org. Hi there, and welcome to The Daily Gardener, a podcast about garden history and literature. I'm Jennifer Ebling, and today is July 11th. Today in garden history, it was on this day, July 11th in 1788, that Horace Walpole wrote about the powerful impact of rain on the garden. Horace wrote, "In this country, nobody pays his debts like rain. It may destroy your flowers, but you cannot complain of want of fruit. Cherries, apples, walnuts are more exuberant than their leaves." And today is the birthday of Dorothy Thompson, who was born on this day, July 11th in 1893. Dorothy was an American journalist and radio broadcaster, and she's remembered as the First Lady of American journalism. In 1934, Dorothy was the first American journalist to be expelled from Nazi Germany. And in her final book, The Courage to Be Happy, which was released in 1957, Dorothy wrote, "I'm inclined to think that the flowers we must love are those we knew when we were very young, when our senses were most acute to color, to smell, and our natures most lyrical." And today we celebrate the birthday of Oliver Sacks, the British neurologist, naturalist, historian of science, and writer. He was born on this day, July 11th in 1933. I once watched a video that featured Dr. Oliver Sacks, who practiced medicine in New York City across from the New York Botanical Garden. In the video, Oliver reflected on the garden and its meaning, and I've cobbled together a few of his most inspiring thoughts. Here's what he said. "I think of this garden, the New York Botanical Garden, as a treasure. First, it's a haven. In a noisy, crowded New York, we need a haven. We wander around, and time doesn't matter too much. When I worked at the hospital opposite the garden, I used to come in every day. Specifically, I would come in after seeing my patients, but before wrapping up my notes. And I would walk around the garden and put everything out of consciousness except the plants and the air. But by the time I got back, the patient's story would have crystallized in my mind, and then I could write it straight away. But I needed this sort of incubation in the garden and to go for a walk in the garden. That sort of thing is an essential thing for me in writing. I think nature has a healing effect. The garden is the closest one can come to nature. And whenever people come to New York from out of town or out of the country, I say, let's go to the garden." And I would like to quote a couple of lines from a T.S. Eliot poem. "Oh, do not ask, what is it? Let us go and make our visit." Isn't that sweet? Well, I love that little quote from T.S. Eliot. And I also had one other quote from Oliver Sacks that I wanted to share with you. This is an excerpt from his book called The River of Consciousness. Oliver wrote, "While most of the flowers in the garden had rich scents and colors, we also had 2 magnolia trees with huge but pale and scentless flowers. The magnolia flowers, when ripe, would be crawling with tiny insects, little beetles. Magnolias, my mother explained, were among the most ancient of flowering plants, and they had appeared nearly 100 million years ago, at a time when modern insects, like bees, had not yet evolved. So they had to rely on a more ancient insect, the beetle, for pollination. Bees and butterflies, flowers with colors and scents, were not preordained, waiting in the wings, and they might never have appeared. They would develop together in infinitesimal stages over millions of years, and the idea of a world without bees or butterflies, without scent or color, affected me with a sense of awe. And it was on this day, July 11th in 2021, so last year, that India's first cryptogamic garden with nearly 50 different species opened to the public. Well, in case you're wondering, cryptogams are non-seed-bearing plants. These primitive plants do not reproduce through seeds. So think of algae, bryophytes like moss and liverworts, lichens, ferns, and fungi. Well, India's first cryptogamic garden is located in the Deoban area of Dehradun in Uttarakhand and is situated at 9,000 feet and is spread over 3 acres, an ideal setup for cryptograms. It's time to grow that garden library with today's book, Botany for the Artist by Sarah Simblett. This book came out in 2020, and the subtitle is An Inspirational Guide to Drawing Plants. Well, in this book, Sarah Simblett takes you on an inspirational journey of creativity and botanical art as she demonstrates how to draw virtually every type of plant. And here's what Sarah wrote in the foreword. This book was inspired by my love of gardening, a desire to know more about the structures, forms, and lives of plants, and an opportunity to spend a whole year exploring wild landscapes and the fabulous collections at the University of Oxford Botanic Garden and Oxford University Herbaria. These collections generously gave or lent me hundreds of pieces of plants to draw or have photographed for this book. And then Sarah talks about this enormous range in species that she covers in her book. She writes, Botany for the Artist features around 550 species chosen to represent almost every kind of plant and habitat on Earth. And so you have gorgeous, unfamiliar exotics that are celebrated alongside more common plants. Sarah writes, I show the beauty and wonder of the bird of paradise flower and the pavement milk thistle, tropical forest fruits and the orchard apple, giant pine cones, and tufts of city moss. And she even includes fungi and some species of alga that are not scientifically classified as plants, but she features them because, quote, they are fabulous to draw and they're fascinating in and of themselves. And then Sarah points out the exponential understanding of a plant that occurs when you draw it. So if you are a gardener who has never before attempted to draw a plant, listen to what Sarah says here. Drawing is a direct and universal language, as old as humankind. And if you spend just 1 hour drawing a plant, you will understand it far better than if you spent the same hour only looking at it. There is something in the physical act of drawing, the coordination of the hand and eye, the translation of the sensory experience into marks and lines that reveals an entirely new way of seeing. Artists know this, but it is something we can all experience if we draw. And time spent drawing is a revelation, regardless of the results. Great insight there. Well, finally, Sarah's book is written in a very friendly tone. She encourages artists and gardeners to just get started and to use live specimens. And I thought this was a great point as well. Sarah wrote, books of advice, classes, and looking at the works of other artists will help you greatly. But you can also learn how to draw simply by doing it. And the first step is just to have a go at it. And then she writes, I always draw from real plants, never photographs, because plants are three-dimensional and were once alive, even if they are no longer. They're physically present and can move, change, and challenge the person drawing them. An artist's relationship with their subject is always innately expressed in their work. And I love that last line. An artist's relationship with their subject is always innately expressed in their work. Well, Sarah wraps things up by saying that throughout the book, Sam Scott Hunter's photographs reveal subtle insights that could not be captured in drawing. The photographs are gorgeous, by the way. And she writes, they magnify many details so that we can look at them very closely. I have drawn most plants life-size for comparison, and also to convey the excitement of giant-sized objects. Well, I hope that you are convinced that drawing your plants will help you to better understand them. And maybe you can even just take a sketchbook out with you this week when you're out in the garden and spend an hour attempting to draw one of your favorite plants, if for no other reason than to understand it better. And if you'd like to get some help, well, Sarah's book is definitely a great resource for you. This book is 256 pages of botanical drawings from exotics to mosses and towering trees. So if you're serious about learning how to draw, well then join Sarah on an illustrated tour of the plant kingdom and deepen your powers of botanical observation, understanding, and appreciation. You can get a copy of Botany for the Artist by Sarah Simblett and support the show using the Amazon link in today's show notes for around $18. Great book. Finally, we end the show today with a Botanic Spark that celebrates Mary Russell Mitford. It was on this day, June 11th, in 1824, that Mary Russell Mitford wrote to Benjamin Robert Hayden to describe her garden. She wrote, "My garden is a perfect rosary, the greenest and most blossomy nook that ever the sun shone upon. It is almost shut in by buildings. One a long open shed, very pretty, a sort of rural arcade where we sit. All and every part of it is untrimmed, antique, weather-stained, and homely as can be imagined, gratifying the eye by its exceeding picturesqueness, and the mind by the certainty that no pictorial effect was intended, and that it owes all its charms to rare accident." Mary has a good sense of humor. And it was on the previous day, July 10th in 1824, that Mary wrote to her dear friend, Emily Jeffson, and she shared her thoughts on the garden as a form of power and fulfillment for women. And I thought I would end the show today with this little excerpt. I just thought it was so great. And before I read it, I just want to point out that a domain is a piece of land. Mary wrote, "I'm so glad that you have a little domain of your own too. It's a pretty thing to be queen over roses and lilies, is it not?" Well, that's it for today's show. Thank you so much for listening to The Daily Gardener. And just a reminder that you have a standing invitation to join the free Facebook group for listeners of the show. The next time you're over at Facebook, just search for Daily Gardener Community, where you'd search for a friend and then request to join. And if you'd like more of The Daily Gardener, you can subscribe to the newsletter over at thedailygardener.org. And don't forget that you can also show your support for the show by using the Buy Me a Coffee link over at the website or in today's show notes. This is Jennifer Ebling. Thanks for listening to The Daily Gardener. And remember, for a happy, healthy life, garden every day.